How's it going, everyone? Welcome. Eulier Gonzalez here. So let's take a look at the AWS IAM service and make a quick recap of how do I get here, shall we? Now, because the entire goal is to understand is the first. I do want to pass the certification exams, not only to hold the title, but also to understand is the most common services that the certified developers associate must know. Why is this? Because, well, at the end of the day, I'm going to offer my services to any other companies that are hosting their web apps or mobile apps on AWS servers. So in order to understand that, well, I do need to dive deep into this. And luckily for us, there is a course taught by Stefan Marek, a French data analyst, that then later on developers and an AWS solution architect. That, well, he actually compile all of these different services in different videos and bundle up into some courses. So for the developers, the software architects, solutions, and I do think is for the machine learning and so on and so forth. So with all of this, and because at the end of the day, the business, the software business is not in the software in itself, it is on the data. That's the business. It's on the power brokers, the data brokers. So I actually yesterday I have my first meeting in a company that actually are in real estate industry. They hold now over 100. They hold over 25 or 50 million records on AWS that they show some listings of real estates and now provide some KPIs to their users, right? Whether it is by geographic locations or how now is the a particularly housing geographical area shows data uh, from example November 25 to against November 2024, and so on and so forth. So all of this kind of metrics and interest in data, right? So to understand now AWS, I look a little bit of history to understand is when it all started. So this start as an internal development, an internal tool in back in 2003 that then in 2004, this is one of the reasons why you don't have to. When you are in those domains, when you are at the frontier and wherever domain you are, then you're starting to have better problems. You realize that you are now leading this industry or leading whatever activity you are doing, that's what happened in Amazon back in 2004 when they say, hey, we're gonna now be is the we're gonna be the internet infrastructures. So we're gonna provide is the hardware and the software to host all of these different applications across across our clients and across industry. Now, having said that, so in 2006, I think it is in 2006 they launched something called the SQS, which is service queue, simple service queue, as a way to now have a particular server capable to handle is all of this incoming distributed message and now responds to that in an orderly fashion. And then as they now expand to other geographical locations, in 2007, I had back then 17 years old. Holy moly! In 2007, well, they expand to Europe, and now AWS servers are being used by Airbnb, Dropbox, in Netflix. And I don't know if, because based on my own experience, when you have all of this a range of services, whether it's for computing or for storing, some hosting, firewall, some routings, and so on and so forth, and the security and authentication. I just only mention is the most common one, right? The biggest bucket in which you can search for services. And based on my own experience, I do think that has been a lot of maybe there has been a great scan of distributing all of these different services, when sometimes companies, they don't need to handle that kind of workload. That's one. And second is, it make very tedious. It takes now longer than ever to make some changes, and those changes be deployed on production. So again, this is just my own opinion, because and I know you are as you scale your applications, and then you started to hire new people and new team members, all of them started to collaborate in different code bases, and if they all collaborate in the same code base, so things started to get a little bit messy. But the thing here is that the problem is not on the scale. The problem is on the retention, on the employee retention. Why? Because if you have, so if you're building a product, right, that you own, so no matter which kind of architecture you use, those people are now capable to deploy any change that the business needs in no time. That's one of the things that I see. Oh, I get it. This is what the problem here. So the problem is not about this. The problem is not about scalability. The problem is people. We got a people's problem, and that people's problem is that those companies, they don't have any incentive to retain those employees, and this is why they need to go out, find somebody in the market, pull it in, pass through the onboarding, and then figuring out ways to actually make their collaborations be effective, right? And defining all of these different layers. But in contrast, if those employees or those people on the operations now they are retained, right? So the compensations, the not only the compensation, but if they're now own some part of the company, and if a lot of this company actually now have long-term visions to be now public and provide some incentives to employees, perhaps you will have now less issues to implement new business rule. This is my thinking. So, but in any case, here we are, okay? And because now AWS is focus our attention is our infrastructure. We look at the global infrastructure that is made of AWS regions. So now they grow like a cancer, but they grow this company at the point that they offer their service across different continents. So they have now North America, South America, Europe, uh, Middle East, Africa, Southeast Asia, or as they put it here, I think is this. Let me take a look at this. Southeast Asia. No, you don't have it. There you go. A global infrastructure, or Asia Pacific. Okay, makes sense. So Asia Pacific, all right, and Australia and New Zealand. So this is how now corporations are going to define and put labels on all of these different regions. So I learned something at school, high school, where they say, no, this is what the, how do I put it? This is what continents are, right? This is these masses of lands and water are, right? So you have is South America, Central America, North America, Europe, Africa, Middle East is, to me, was not there, right? But yes, Middle East. We also call now Russia, and then we also call now China and Asia, and then Oceania, right? But now companies here which are shaping is the educational landscape, they are going to impose this. Why is that? Because unlike states that they are now, unlike states where they financially back all of these school institutions, here they're backing themselves, right? Of course, with the help of the government, when they receive some lower interest loans, so on and so forth, some lobbying, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, so there are two now institutions that both of them are receiving funds and rights from the state. So in any case, this is the AWS global infrastructure, and these AWS regions. So these regions, right, are clusters of data centers. They are physical facilities when you can have access of all of this service, a range of physical service on their availability zones. So these are now is facilities that are isolated in a region, so to prevent any or to avoid any disasters when they have now redundant power and connectivity. And these availability zones, you can think of this as facility that they host now certain data centers. Usually you have now three of them. You have now wherever the region is, followed by a, let's say, A, B, C, okay? Some other regions might have six, but usually you have at least three. That's interesting. Why that number, okay? And I'm assuming by some mathematical description here, so, right? For example, triangles, in any case. So yeah, so these availability zones are facility that owns their own clusters, their own cluster of service that are highly connected and highly so they're highly connected among each one of those availability zones through high throughputs and low latency, or to high bandwidth with ultra low latency networking. They are physically separated or isolated to reduce. They are physically isolated for disasters, right? So this is availability zones, And also, I look at something called AWS Point of Presence. I am not quite familiar with this. Some of them talk about the AWS Cloud front from AWS front for no no so um, AWS front. Mm, well, I'm not sure what CloudFront. Okay, AWS CloudFront. Right, AWS CloudFront, uh, which is our like CDNs. So they call this point of presence, but this is talking about is CDNs, content delivery network. So to now be close to the user locations and from there now serve the content. So again, something that I'm going to see that later. All right, and now a tour of the console to get familiar of the interface. All right, so I also explore now some common services like when you can search that, whether it's through the icon or through the search bar. In most AWS services, right, they are now is region scope. So for example, Route 53 and IAMs are now exceptions to the rule. Even the same for cloud fronts or web application firewall. Interesting. But for example, like Lambda functions, recognitions, and Elastic Beanstalk, platform as a service, Amazon EC2, and I'm assuming also that Redshift, okay, another database that you have to deal with. So all of these are now region-based services, which is the norm more than the exceptions. So how you can now choose is services based on regions. Okay, so it's going to depend on the compliance. Okay, if those services now are available to that particular area, and they now uh, follow certain government policies, for example, that your application must not leave that region, the data of the application must not leave the region, and the availability of those services and the proximity of those services to end users, and also the cost, because different regions now so different regions are most so different regions are more expensive than others. So that's great. All right, this is just the huge overview of the AWS infrastructure. How do we get here, and the anatomy of the AWS infrastructure. So AWS regions, availability zones, and point of presence with CloudFronts, and a tour of the console. Or yeah, exactly, in a tour of the AWS console. Now, finally, of our first services, AWS Identity Access Management here. Okay, so first thing first, this allow us to now define roles, accounts, and groups. So those accounts can now belongs to multiple groups. Groups cannot be in groups cannot belongs to multiple groups. All right, and you can now in those groups define certain policies in a JSON like objects, right? These policies are defining is what are the service what so these policies are defining is what this account can access. Okay, what this account is allowed or not to access, what this account is allowed to access or not what this account is allowed to access to what what are the actions. Okay, so what are the actions that this specific account is allowed or not to access through to this different resource, right? And I do think that's quite interesting to take notes, right? So these permissions are, so these permissions or these policies, these permissions, these policies describe what actions a user, what action an account or a role, all right, what actions, okay, these policies describe what actions a role can, what actions a role is allowed or not to access for any specific or for exactly for a collection of services, for a collection of registers, for a collection of registers or services, right? This is what it is. This is what these policies are describing in a JSON-like object. In a JSON object, right? So you have now the ID, which is optional. You're defining is the version. Okay, you have the version. You have an ID that is optional. You also have is the effect that allow or not if this policy actually it is. You also have the actions that you can go with, aka what are the possible actions that you can do. I do think this is something that you can describe as an array, all right, and also the resource that this role can access. And then I look at now a more hands-on approach of how actually can I create is these groups and also users. Okay, pretty straightforward. It's nothing too fancy there. You can also specify is the policy, and again we're describing is the workflow here of the IAM creating users. Okay, so first is giving the name and the password. I can set up the password down there. And also the second step is the policies or the permissions. Review the content here. And then now retrieve the password. So you can send the password to the users or not. I also look at how you can now add a user to a group. How you can now specify is alias to this user, so they can now have quickly access through a more human readable URL. Okay, and also how you can now is create your own policies here, right? So the policy inheritance. So whether it's you create those permissions per group, and now those users can inherit those permissions based on that particular group, or you can define is just only one, you know. That makes a lot of sense. And this is the policy structure here. IAM policy and structure. As I mentioned before, this is the anatomy of that. And I want to hit the brake a little bit here to the MFS device option in AWS, right? Because that to me was quite interesting, since I do need to get them. it? Yeah. Mm. All right, and we're back. We are back. Okay. So it's this one, right? The multi-factor authentication.
Now that we have created users and groups, it is time for us to protect these users and groups.
Let me now. Exactly. IAM password policy, or to protect those users. Okay. So we now we have created users and group. It is time to protect them. So whether it's using password policy or multi-factor authentication. Why not?
From being compromised. So for this,
What you
we have two defense mechanisms. The first one is to define what's called a password policy. Why? Well, because the stronger the password you use, the more security for your accounts. So in AWS, you can set up a password policy with different options. The first one is you can set a minimum password length, and you can require specific character types.
But again, this is two mechanisms, right? So we have two mechanisms, two defense mechanism. Whether it's um, password policy, okay, makes a lot of sense. So password policy, and I don't know why you put things like that. Why that heading is like so. Oh, I get it. Does Arial really have that? Anyway. Anyway, it'll be like this. So password policy, and the other is multi-factor authentication. Multi-factor authentication. Come on.
For example, you may want to have an uppercase letter, lowercase letter, number, non-alphanumeric characters, for example, a question mark, and so on. Then you can allow or not IAM users to change their own passwords, or you can require users to change their password after some time to make your password expired. For example, to say every 90 days, users have to change their passwords. Finally, you can also prevent password reuse so that users, when they change their passwords, don't change it to the one that they already have or change it to the one they had before.
So for example, with this, whether it's password policy, whether it's password policy, so you enforce is to use now strong password, or you can set up a password policy to that to protect those users. So now that we have created users and groups, it is time to protect users. It is time to protect users. And here they have now. So Amazon has figuring out right now these two. Not only with Amazon, because Gartner is also another company that actually has this magic quadrant when they show. So when analysts in there So they have a division. So they have several divisions, and one of them is responsible for market research. I do think that that's quite compelling and interesting. And the other is for security research, right? When now they come up with this zero trust principle, right? Uh, when here you don't guarantee, so not only the threats are coming from outside, but also from inside. And they have now, for example, Cloudflare follows several of these policies to make sure that their applications, and if anyone with unauthorized access or with one, they don't make a mess, right? Okay, so IAM password policy, strong password, higher security for your account is that. So this is the two mechanism, the two defense mechanism, and I do find that quite compelling. Okay, all right. Oh, and this is also for okay. This is so silly. This is for any time that you create an account, which is all of these applications will require you to do that, and then now follow this particularly policies or protocols to make sure of that. You're starting to see how you can use this to your daily life. So far, I have been using some of these password managers that help me to store and manage uh, all of this password across different applications, and provide me some nice little uh, auto completion features in the browser. Okay, makes a lot of sense. All right. So password is one of them, and the other is the multi-factor authentication. Mm-hmm. Okay. So with AWS, you can not only set password policies to say, also to inform minimum length and require some character types, let's say numbers, special characters, or alphanumeric, non-alphanumeric characters, uh, that this password must not be, so you shouldn't reuse this password. Yeah, you shouldn't reuse this password. Uh, you can allow the users to change their password, and you can set an expiration password, or known as password rotation. Mm. I don't know if this password rotation is something. I do think that this is a product here. I do think that there is a product here, right? When you can offer now is, um, yeah, what you can offer to the user is where you tell the user, hey, let me now is reset the password after an X amount of day, right? First, there must be a, yeah, first, mm-hmm. So first, there must be a demo, all right? So, and a demo is a preview, so you change the password and then you verify that that password was changed successfully, and so on and so forth. So you're not reinventing the wheel. So what you're gonna do is just embedding those in your application. Mm-hmm. Right? Mm-hmm. And then after the next amount of day, your password will be rotated. Mm. Mm. Mm.
So this is
Mm.
great. A password policy really is helpful against brute force attacks on your accounts. But there's a second defense mechanism that you need to know going into the exam. And this is the multi-factor authentication, or MFA. It is possible you already used it on some websites, but on AWS it's a must and it's very recommended to use it.
Yeah.
So user
Not only for This is a must for all applications. Come on, stop, man, stop.
Have access to your account, and they can possibly do a lot of things, especially if they're administrators. They can change configuration, delete resources, and other things.
Here users have access to your account and can possibly change configuration or delete resources in your AWS account.
So you absolutely want to protect at least your root account and hopefully all your IAM department.
Why is that?
And this is the multi-factor authentication, or MFA. It is possible you already used it on some websites, but on AWS it's a must and it's very recommended to use it. So users have access to your account and they can possibly do a lot of things, especially if they're administrators. They can change configuration, delete resources, and other things. So you absolutely want to protect at least your root account and hopefully all your IAM users. So how do we protect them on top of the password? Well, you use an MFA device. So what is
Okay. So this is a must for all applications, and especially for AWS account. For the AWS services. So you must protect at least your root user and IAM users. So how to do that? Well, by using an MFA device, multi-factor authentication device, which is equal to something that you know, a password, and something that you own. Something that you know, for example, like a password, plus something that you own, like a cell phone or a device. This is the formula of MFA, and in this silly formula, all right. And this silly formula is now the foundations and the reason of why you're using now MFS. So once I know this, I can use this, all right, and I can assign some resource to have a specific MFA device. Makes a lot of sense. And I know that this is what I need to do to guarantee the security of my account, right? Okay. Keep going. Let's keep going.
MFA is using the combination of a password that you know and a security device that you own. And these two things together have a much greater security than just a password. So for example, let's take Alice. Alice knows her password, but she also has an MFA generating token. And by using these things together while logging in, she's going to be able to do a successful login on MFA. So the benefit of MFA is that even if Alice has lost her password because it's stolen or it's hacked, the account will not be compromised because the hacker will need to also get a hold of the physical device of Alice, that could be her phone, for example, to do a login. Obviously, that is much less likely. So what are the MFA devices option in AWS?
Exactly.
Of Alice, that could be her phone, for example, to do a login. Obviously, that is much less likely. So what are the MFA devices option?
Makes a lot of sense. Completely makes a ton of sense here. So what are the MFA devices options?
function in AWS, and you need to know them going into the exam, but don't worry, they're quite simple. The first one is a virtual MFA device. This is what we'll be using in the hands-on. And so you can use,
so for example, it's
Google
TOTP,
which is just working on one phone at a time. Or
Time
using
one.
Authy. So for up,
All right. This is TOT, virtual MFA device. So virtual MFA device, or known as TOTP, that is time-based one time password. All right. This TOT is in fact is a paper. Time-based one-time password is in fact is a paper. It's an online generator based on the RFC 62 algorithm, a web-based analog of the Google Authentication mobile application. TOT.app has no server code. This is TOT generator. Let me see if there you get it. The release, that's right. The algorithm, bro. Holy shit. Password algorithm. Makes a lot of sense. How that works? Go beyond the scope of today's video. But at least it is quite interesting to know how that this is the algorithm. All right, this is the sequence, the steps. Again, an algorithm. The word of algorithm comes from the Arab language, algorithm, alchemia, so on and so forth. Okay.
Authy, you have support for multiple tokens on a single device. So that means that with the virtual MFA device, you can have your root account, your IAM user, another account, another IAM user. It's up to you. You can have as many users and accounts as you want on your virtual MFA device, which make it a very easy solution to use. Now we have another thing called a universal second
and
factor,
this is
or
not
UTF,
owning a physical
security
device.
key. And that is a physical device.
Okay, you got this. You got now physical devices, which is the universal second factor. Universal second factor security key, right? Whether it's
device.
YubiKey.
For example, a YubiKey by Yubico. And Yubico is a third party to AWS. This is not AWS that provides it. This is a third party. And we use a physical device because maybe it's super easy. You put it on your key fobs and you're good to go. So this YubiKey supports multiple root and IAM users using a single security key, so you don't need as many keys as users, otherwise that will be a nightmare. Then you have other options.
Wait, what?
So this YubiKey supports multiple root and IAM users.
Oh, okay. This YubiKey support multiple root and IAM users. Okay, thanks. So this support multiple roots and IAM user, multiple roots and IAM users. So you can hold this there
using a single security key, so you don't need as many keys as users, otherwise that will be a nightmare. Then you have other options. You have a hardware key fob MFA device.
Hardware key fob and an MFA device. This is hardware key fob MFA device. These are not quite familiar. Okay.
For example, this one provided by Gemalto, which is also a third party to AWS. And finally, if you are using the cloud of the government in the US, the AWS Gov Cloud, then you have a special key fob that looks like this, that is provided by SurePass ID, which is also a third party. So that's it. We've seen the theory on how to protect your account, but let's go in the next step.
And the other is the hardware key fob MFA device. Okay. And the hardware key fob MFA device for AWS Google Cloud. In hardware key fob MFA device MFA device for AWS government cloud. Government cloud. For example, provided by SurePass ID.
Lecture to implement that. So I will see you in the next lecture.
Interesting. Makes a lot of sense.
So we are going to first define a password policy. For this, click on Account Settings on the...
Here, this is IAM MFA hands-on. Okay. MFA IAM hands-on. Okay.
On the left-hand side, you will find password policy, and you can edit it. So here we can use the IAM default password policy, which composes of these kind of requirements, or we can customize the password policy and force a password minimum.
So whether it's a password policy,
require uppercase
the
letter,
defensive
lowercase
mechanism,
letter,
or by using
number,
an
a
MFS.
non-alphanumeric character. We can also turn on password expiration to turn on,
exactly,
for example,
password
after 90
expiration
days, or that if password expiration requires administrator reset.
Let me actually is, well, get in there, bro. I'm not sure where you're looking at. If you're looking is at the step CCP, I do think it's whatever my works, right? Sign in again. AWS Active Services. You got this one. Let me sign in as the root user. Oh my god, I'm gonna put this one like this. yeah. I am used to that. Username and password. Okay. And then you got is this. Right, here, and here, which is another user, right? Root user, and I am earlier. And here I use my brew bank. And I'm using is this. There you got it. Alright, so if I want to have access to, let's say, hey, what is the password? Here's the password, bro. And I need to protect this root user password. Right now it's asking me for registering your MFA for root credential will require in 34 days. So I have a month to set this up, right? And set up an MFA device. One of the defensive mechanisms to protect accounts. Skip for now, right? And the show is this, right? Security recommendations. Here you can define not only the users, the groups, but also the policies. And if I want to set up the, I do think this is on the account setting, password policies, exactly. But I am on the group. Right? If I say edit password policy, I can do that. And also, this is true as well for the other users. For example, like this, right? Where I say this. Come on. Wow, it's taking too long, bro. And you did it. Okay. And you get this, right? I didn't set the AWS that. I'll go for IAM, right? There you got it. And then now to this, right? So I can say this is root access management, account settings. I can set the password policy to that. Exactly, but this is per account. All right. This is per account, or I can set that. All right.
Or we can allow the users to change their own password, or we can prevent password reuse. So this password policy can be edited directly from the IAM console, and that's the first part of security. The second part is around setting multi-factor authentication for your root account. So if you click on the account name and then click on security credentials, if you are logged in with the root user, you will see my security credentials root user. Now, there is a way for you to actually protect your root user, which is the most important account in your AWS account, and you can protect it by using multi-factor authentication. Now, just so you know, I'm going to do it and demonstrate how it works in front of you, but I've had students who locked themselves out of their accounts because they lost access to their multi-factor authentication device. As such, if you think you are running the risk of losing your iPhone or whatever, do not do this, okay? Just keep your phone with you, just watch my video, it will be good enough. If you want to practice along with me, you can as well, and you can also delete the MFA device after activating it. Okay, but let's go ahead and assign an MFA device. So I will call this one.
You put not the device name.
This is what I have, but you can name it whatever you want. Then you can select the type of MFA device. So it could be an authenticator app, which is something I'm going to use, but also it can be a security key or a hardware TOTP token. So I'm going to use an authenticator app because it will be virtual. And now we go into the setup of the app. So there's a list of compatible applications right here. You can find here for Android and for iOS that we know work well with it.
Okay, some couple of applications here: Twilio, Authy, Duo, LastPass Authentication, Microsoft Authentication, Semantic. This is our industry leaders. I'm actually currently using another one,
AWS.
Aegis.
And as such, I'm going to use the Twilio Authy Authenticator, which is an app I like. So what I have to do then is actually launch the app on my phone, and then you click on Show QR Code. So when you show the QR code, you need to scan this QR code directly on your phone. So for this, you add an account, you scan the QR code right here, and once scanned, it will add the account and start naming it. So we'll just save this, this looks good. And then we get access to MFA codes. So there is the first MFA code, so 301935. So this is a code generated by my iPhone in real time, and this code is going to change over time. And the reason why these two codes are asked by AWS is that it wants to make sure that the MFA device is set up correctly and that the codes are accurate. So the second code is 792843, and of course there will be different for your device. And once these two codes are entered, you click on Add MFA.
Passkey or security key.
We can register up to 8 MFA devices.
Authentication app.
And you can scroll down and see them right here on the list.
Or hardware TOTP token.
MFA. One, it's called
This is interesting because you have authenticating using your fingerprint. This is another one.
But so how do you use MFA? Well, now if I log out of AWS and I log back in, so I'm going to use my root account and my password.
Because there is another one.
Now, after doing a successful login, I have
because there is another one, my friend.
And so
it's not only the hardware, but also you have is the physical or passkey or security key.
Logged in.
So
and this is perfect because, well, we had an extra level of security on our account. So that's it for this lecture. I hope you liked
Passkey
it,
is
and I will see
authenticating
you in the
using
next
your
lecture.
fingerprints, face or screen lock. Create a passkey on this device or use
So we
another.
have seen how to
here.
access AWS using.
Wait a single moment, because the other is passkey as they call, or security key. Create a passkey on this device or use another device. Passkey display name options. Authenticator or hardware TOT. Passkey display name. When signing I'm in using passkey, the default suggest name can be customized if needed. Use a default passkey display. Authenticate using your fingerprint, face, or screen lock. Passkey, which is authenticate using your fingerprint. Oh my god. Anyway, it's a bunch of data. Your fingerprint, face, fingerprint, face, or screen lock. Right? That's another one. He doesn't mention that, but in my case, I'm gonna go with the Authenticator app, right? I'm here, diggy, so I can now show QR code. If I go and say, hey, let's use what I have here. Okay. And then I scan the code. This is supposed to work, right? Exactly. Take it in, the AWS. Okay. And then I can add that. It's going to tell me what it is. Oh, look at this. It's waiting for two codes here. That's interesting. It's waiting for two codes. And then wait 30 seconds and enter the second code here. So now MFA device assigned to this. You can register up to 8 MFA device of any combination of the current MFA device support here. Look at you. Look at you, my friend. TOTP. This shit is written in Java. Holy fuck. Bean development. Buying a coffee. Time based and how HOTP. What is an HOTP? HOTP. Oh, hash-based one-time password. It's an event-driven algorithm for creating unique single-use code. Here, it is HMAC based one. Holy shit, nigga. This one. The other is the time-based. Okay, and this is now is HMAC based one-time password. Algorithm using the hash-based message authentication code. Software tokens are available for nearly all major platforms here. The early reception from some of the computer press was negative during 2004-2005. IETF adopted HTTP as this in December 2005. Various vendors start to produce HTTP compatible tokens here. According to the article Roadmap, replacing password with OTP authentication on strong authentication published by Burden, a division of Gartner Inc. In 2010, Gartner expectation is the hardware OTP form factor. OTP is one-time password. Form factor will continue to enjoy modest growth while smartphone OTP will grow and become the default hardware platform over time. Gartner is involved in all of this. Gartner is involved in all of this. Makes a lot of sense. One of them is hash, using the MAC address. All right. Using is the MAC address for okay. Holy shit. Here we are. Okay. I already said that. Right? Let's keep going.
The management console, which is the web interface that we've done so far in this course, but there are actually three different options to access AWS. So the first one is the management console we've seen. So we have seen how to access AWS using the management console, which is the web interface that we've done so far in this course, but there are actually three different options to access AWS. So the first one is the management console we've seen, and is protected by a username and password, maybe multi-factor authentication. Then there is the CLI, command line interface. And this is something we will set up on our computer, and this is protected by access keys, and access keys are credentials we're going to download in a few seconds that will allow us to access AWS from our terminal. Then finally, there is the SDK, the AWS Software Development Kit, which is used whenever you want to call APIs from AWS from within your application code. And again, these will be protected by the exact same access keys. So how do we generate access keys? Well, we will do this through the management console, and users are responsible for their own access keys. And access keys, from a user perspective, they are secret, just like a password. So if you generate your own access keys, do not share them with your colleagues because they can generate their own access keys as well. So really make sure that you treat your access key ID just like your username and your secret access key just like your password. You do not share them with other people. So when you go into the management secret access key, just like your password, you do not share them with other people. So when you go into the management console, you keys. And access keys, from the user perspective, they are secret, just like a password. So if you generate your own access keys, do not share them with your colleagues because they can generate their own access keys as well. So really make sure that you treat your access key ID just like your username and your secret access key just like your password. You do not share them with other people. So when you go into the management console, you get access key, and there's a button to create access keys, and then it gives you the right to download it in the very second. And so, for example, here's a fake access key ID and a fake secret access key. And these, when loaded into my command line interface,
I will say that this is now the different ways to access. Exactly. How can users access AWS? AWS access key, CLI and SDK. CLI and SDK. Exactly. AWS access key, CLI and SDK. Or how users can access AWS, right?
Using the management console, which is the
Oh, did you repeat this? Okay.
web interface. And this is some keys. Into the management console, you get access key, and there's a button to create access keys, and then it gives you the right to download it in the very second. And so, for example, here's a fake access key ID and a fake secret access key. And these, when loaded into my command line interface, would allow me to access the AWS API. And we'll do this in the hands-on in a second. So again, remember, I want to make sure that you don't have any security issues while doing this course or at work. Do not share your access keys, they are private to you. So if you're new to the cloud and programming and so on, or IT, then you might not know what's a CLI. So CLI stands for Command Line Interface. And the AWS CLI is a tool that allows you to interact with the AWS services using commands from your command line shell. So whenever you see some code where you type a command line and then it returns results, for example, AWS S3 CP and so on, this is what we call the CLI. And we are using the AWS CLI because we start every command by the word AWS. Now with this CLI, you get direct access to the public APIs of your AWS services, which is going to be very helpful in this course. And then using the CLI, you can develop scripts to manage your resources and automate some of your tasks. The CLI is open source, you can find all the source code on GitHub, and it is an alternative to using the AWS Management Console. I know that some people actually do not even use the Management Console, they only use the CLI, for example.
AWS Management Console, I will be one of them. You know, it's fast, bro. It's fast.
So what's the SDK now? SDK stands for Software Development Kit, and this is a set of library. This is going to be language specific, so you're going to have an SDK for different programming languages. And similarly, it will allow you to access and manage your AWS services and APIs programmatically. But this time, the SDK is not something that you use within your terminal. It is something that you embed within your application that you have to code. So your application will have the AWS SDK from within them. It supports many different programming languages, such as JavaScript, Python, PHP, .NET, Ruby, Java, Go, Node.js, C++, all of that are programming languages. There's also the mobile SDK if you're using Android or iOS, and the IoT, so Internet of Things device SDK, in case you're using some thermal sensors or bike locks that are connected. All these
thermal sensors.
So to give you an example of what you can build with the SDK, well, the AWS CLI that we're going to be using in this course is actually built on the AWS SDK for Python named Boto. So that's it for this lecture. Now in the next lecture, we're going to practice setting up the CLI and dealing with the access keys. So I will see you in the next lecture.
Well, actually, okay. And it's interesting because a lot of these tools are written in Python. So it's like a lot of the team members. It's like a lot of team members actually, right? They somehow, it's like a lot of these team members. They wrote those apps in Python because that's what they know at that moment, and then you get it.
So we are going to install the AWS command line on Windows. So for this, we'll do AWS CLI install Windows on Google, and this will give us the list link. And we want to install the AWS CLI version 2 on Windows, okay? This is the latest, and so we'll get up to date. It doesn't change much versus version 1. It's just some improved performance and capability, but the API is exactly the same, and there's also an improved installer. So I'm going to scroll down in here, and to install a Windows, we can just simply use it, install it using the MSI installer. So I just click on this link to download the MSI installer. Then I'm going to run the installer, so it should be very, very simple. Now the installer is starting. I click on next, I accept the terms of the license, click on next, install, and then we wait for the installer to be done. Yes, I want to allow whatever this is doing.
Installer.
Okay, so the installer is now complete.
Command line for the
I click on finish, and now I can go ahead and open a command line. So I'll do command line, command prompt, here we go, on Windows. And to be sure that it's fully installed, I just tap AWS -- version.
So I'm installing
is
Pakey A.
And if you get a result
PKG.
like this, AWS CLI, a version that starts with a 2,
for all users,
Python, Windows, that means that your AWS CLI is now properly installed on Windows, and you're good to go. Finally, just note that if you want to upgrade your AWS CLI, then you just need to re-download that MSI installer and just rerun the install, and it will be automatically upgraded. But as soon as you have this output, you're good to go, and you can follow me in the next lecture. So see you in the next lecture.
Installing is on this current user, not for all users, right?
So let's install the AWS CLI on Mac, and
yeah, that's right. That's what I'm doing right now. Just follow the instruction. Just follow the instruction. It's a hey. Contact for assistance. Move to trash. I do think this is because I'm not logged in. Right? It freaks up. Right? It freaks up. I need to run this as an admin rights. Exactly. Take a moment. All right. That is done. And let's get into this. Let's install this again, but I think I removed that. So no problem. Let's install that again. Here, continue. I already agreed with this software license. I want to install only for this user, right? I'm installing that, writing files on my disk. Okay, so it's using now some space on disk to write it, but it tells me, hey, the installing encountered an error that caused the installations to fail. But it doesn't tell me anything else here. Okay.
And for this, we're just going to go on Google on Mac how to install it. So we can just download a PKG file. This will be a graphical installer. On continue, install, and this goes ahead and installs the CLI on Mac. So we wait for everything to be done. Let the installer do trash. And now to test this out, you say, okay, install for all the users on this computer.
Okay. So yeah, the only thing that is because IAM is not installing that for all my, well, anyway. Install for all users on this computer, right? Somehow now the, okay. No. Somehow now this it doesn't allow me to, because I'm installing it with sudo. I don't want that, but in any case, it doesn't allow me to install that. So no problem. Good. Move to trash. I already installed that for only the current user. Doesn't require sudo, and there you got it, right? Now, if you want to check that, you say, hey, I want to open up is a terminal. And then I wanna do is this. So command node found npm ls. I don't care. All right. What if I say, hey, seashell? No, terminal. All right. Command not found in npm. Oh, it takes a lot. Okay, it takes a lot to run that. Anyway, but here we are. Okay, so which that tells me is the location of a broken file. So which AWS? I'm using the one that I installed locally for this user, and if I check this binary, you can say version, and I'm installing. Why it takes so long? And isn't okay. Wow. So Python. So this AWS CLI reading in Python, it takes a lot. Oh my god. Python Darwin 25.1 is an executive files on ARM64. It took a while, bro. It took a while. Okay, so now that I have that installed as a way of one way to have access to AWS services.
Click on continue and
Alright.
install it to try the terminal app. Mine is called iTerm on Mac, which is also a free terminal you can use. And then you just type AWS --version, and if everything is going well, then it should give you back the version of the AWS executable. So let's wait for a little bit.
Oh my god.
And we get the insert AWS CLI 2.0.10, so that means everything has been installed correctly. So that's it for this lecture. In case of issues, please have a look at this guide. It will have.
Exactly. So let's go to now install is this. The AWS CLI setup. Okay. AWS CLI setup on Windows, Mac, and Linux. The TLDR is like check the docs, bro. Check the docs. Check the docs. You know, check the docs. Check out the docs. Yeah, check out the docs. Check out the docs.
The answer for you, and that's it for me. I will. Okay, so let's proceed with installing the AWS CLI on Linux. So for this, I'll just Google it, and I will choose installing the AWS CLI version. This one is to get a zip file. The next thing you have to do is to unzip it, and then install.
Yeah, in Linux, everything is much more manual.
This should prompt me for my password, which I enter right now, and then the install should proceed. Now it says you can run user local bin AWS --version, or there is simply AWS --version if your user local, and then you get Python. You can go ahead with the rest of the lectures. If you get any issues, so let me show you how to create access keys. So I will click on my user.
So on the identity access management on that particular user, okay, I can create my own AWS or secret keys, which is AWS CLI hands-on, AWS CLI hands-on, to create my own CLI keys. All right. This is how to create my own access key.
Username Stéphane, and I'm going to go under security credentials. I will scroll down and I will create an access key. Security credentials. I will scroll down and I will create.
Again, this
go
might
under
change. This might change. This might change. This might change.
Security credentials. I will scroll down and
but the thing here is that this access key
will create an access key. As you can see, there are some selection you need to do, and based on the
so whether it's use case, command line interface, local code, application running on AWS compute service, third-party services, application running outside of AWS.
I'm doing, for example, I want to ask you for the CLI. AWS is going to have an alternative recommended.
An alternative recommended. AWS Cloud Share a browser-based CLI to run commands. Oh, okay, so they have another app here and use the AWS CLI, enable authentication through a user in IAM identity
For example, for the CLI, it's better to use Cloud Shell, which I will show you in the next lecture, so don't worry about it, or to use the CLI v2 and an authentication through the IAM Identity Center, which I will not show you because it's a bit more complicated. So based on what you want to do, if it's local code, application running outside of AWS or in AWS and so on.
Exactly. So based on my use case, you plan to use this access key to enable AWS CLI to access your AWS account.
You will have some recommendation in the bottom. For now, we're going to use the CLI and we'll use these access keys, and we'll click here to say I understand the above recommendation, and I still want to create an access key because it is important for you to understand how they are, how they work, what they are, and so on. So let's create this access key, and now this is the only time you'll be able to have access to the access key.
Okay. So here we select is this one, and then retrieve the access key.
And now this is the only time you'll be able to have access to the access key and the secret access key. So I will go back now to a previous version of that lecture where you see the old UI, but don't worry, nothing changes from that point on. The first thing I have to do is to configure my AWS CLI. So I'm going to type AWS configure. And then I am greeted with entering my access key ID. Very nice. I can just enter this one and press enter. And then I'm greeted with entering my secret access key, which I will enter right here as well. The default region name, so this is a region that is close to you. I will choose EU West 1 because I will be doing all my tutorials in EU West 1. Okay. You will choose your own region and you can enter your own region name. That the region name, by the way, you can get directly from this drop down right here. It shows you the name of the region as well as the region code. So for me, I'm going to use my EU West 1, I'll press enter. And in the default output format, I'll just press enter as well. So now my AWS CLI is configured. And so we can have a look at how it works. We can do AWS IAM list users and press enter. And this will list all the users in my account. And as we can see, the user I have right now is called Stefan. Here is the user ID.
So you can have access to the reason
when it was created and when the password was last used, which is very similar to what I would get if I were to go into this UI right here. So the management console and the CLI do provide similar kind of information. Next, I want
okay. So, makes sense. Makes sense. Makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense. But what I'm seeing here is that reading or writing, usually reading services through console is way faster. Okay.
What happens if we remove permissions from our users? So I'm going to go to admins and I'm going to remove the Stefan user from the group admin. And so again, if I go back to my user, Stefan, it doesn't have any permissions. And I did this obviously with my root account, not the other account. So now, if I go into my UI and obviously refresh this page, I'm going to get an error saying that yes, I do not have the permissions to do this. But let's try to do the same thing with the CLI. So we're going to do an IAM list user call, and we get no response because actually it was being denied. So the CLI permissions are obviously going to be the exact same as the permissions you get from the IAM console. So the takeaway from this lecture is that you can access AWS using the management console or using access key and secret access key that you can configure and then use into the.
So here, by doing is this, right? So by creating is our own secrets here. Okay. No. You show in the wrong order. Why? Yeah, you show me in the wrong order. So if I say this, would you pick up in the proper order? Still pasting that in the order that he wants. Okay, doesn't matter. Okay, this is how it works. Okay, no problem. The French toast you're doing. The French toast you're doing. But stay there. Then there. No. There. And then stay. Exactly. Stay there. You retrieve the access key. And that'll be all. So let's get into this. I am now at this here, right? And if for some reason I do want to make this user the policy here, specifically the users, so I can get in here and I can provide the administrator access to, right? So what he did is just to change it is users.
CLI is configured, and so we press enter, and then.
So here, let's see if I can access to by account settings. Okay. And again, that's right. I am user Euler. That's right. I can now is create access report. Not at all. Identity providers, account settings, service, none at all. Identity providers. What I do want is to get access to my access keys, right? Access keys. So if I go to user, then I click here. So to my access keys, permission boundary, diggy, and then I go to security credentials, makes sense, on the user, and I say, hey, create an access key. So I create this access key. I understand the above recommendation. I want to proceed to create an access key, right? Description of this, you say, hey, this is Mac. M1 Pro, right? This is M1 Pro Mac. Create the access key. So now I do have this. Access key, right? Which is this. This is the access key, and this is the access key, exactly, and the secret key. So I can programmatically or through the console access to that. This is something that is managed by the root. They must have hire and a specific individual to manage this. Okay. An access key best practice. So never store your access key in plain text, in a code repository or in code. Disable and delete access key when no longer needed. Enable least privilege permission, and rotate access key regularly. Right. So good. Continue without viewing or downloading. Yes. And now this is done one time. Okay. This is the access key and the secret key. So if I want to have access to, I say AWS configure, he's gonna ask me is the access key. There you got it. The secret key, right? And also the region. So in my case, that's a good question. So in my case, I do want to have access to let's go with the example. Let's go with the example because certain services might not be available to my location. I am right now in Buenos Aires, so I don't know what might go wrong or yes or whatever. So yeah, Jesus. Where is it?
In the default.
So he used US one. Oh, east and west. Okay. West. This is Europe. Europe. It might take quite a bit, but I go with that. EU West one. EU West one. All right. Default output format as a JSON, and that's done. I already configured that, so I can now, if I say IAM list users, okay, it's now hitting the API, and I can see my data here as it is, right? So user ID, RN, create a date, and password last used as it is. Holy fuck. So if for some reason now I revoke those permissions here, right? If I revoke those permissions, right, and I say is remove those permissions, remove them, and then I refresh here, trying to look at the users here, it say now in a more nice way, access denied, right? The interface changed a little bit. So when I try to have access to, it's I'm gonna get an empty. Now it tells me here, an error occurred, access denied when calling the list user operations. So now it's more intuitive. It's okay. It's more explicit about the error. So I'm gonna go back and give the users add permissions. What I want to add permissions to the group. Right. didn't add. So this is the admin. Oh, because on the admin I didn't add that. I have only on the roles, on the user, right? I can now add a permission, so I add a loosely permission there. But let me yes indeed add that to the group, right? Yeah, I don't have any user here. Okay, makes sense. Or manage the permissions here. So let me add this user here, right? And now these users can have access to that list to read about that, right? I don't have any permissions here. Okay, simulate this and say, hey, administrator access, AWS management. What about now? Now I can read that as it is. So it takes some time to get there. All right. Okay, that was quite illustrative.
Output format, I'll just press your user back. Permissions are obviously going to be the exact same as the permissions you get from the IAM console. So the takeaway from this lecture is that you can access AWS using the management console or using access key and secret access key that you can configure and then use into the CLI. So I hope you liked it, and I will see you in the next lecture. And obviously, do not forget to add your user back into the group, otherwise that would be horrible. So I'm going to go into groups, admins, and I'm going to add my Stefan user back into my group, and now I'm an administrator again. So that's it. I will see you in the next lecture.
Okay.
Okay, so I would like to talk to you about an alternative to using the terminal to issue commands against AWS. And this is using
Okay. It becomes through wet by immersing in the liquid. So soak. Yeah. Chickpeas. Yeah, I soak chickpeas on water for 24 hours, sparkling a bit of pepper, salt, and curcumin. Put it on a plate with put it on a plate with put it on a plate with a bit of water, okay, salt and curcumin, all of that on a plate with a bit of water, and put it into the oven for 240 Fahrenheit, and put it in an oven for 240 Fahrenheit for 45 minutes, and that's it. And and it's and then it's ready. And now it's ready. And now it's ready to be devoured. And now it's ready to devour. And now it's ready to be devoured. That's right. That's right. I soak and remove. Interesting. Okay. Okay. That's interesting. You got it. Yeah, I'm using is the same multi-factor device here, and that's not a good idea. That's definitely not a good idea. That's definitely not a good idea. Malvada sea. Mm-hmm. Ah, okay. Because this is another one. This is another one. Hmm. Mhm. 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 So here now ask me is for this way to protect my account, right? The defensive mechanism, whether it's password, policy, and MFA. Mm. Mm-hmm. All right. Ask for GitHub Copilot seat option for your admin to get real-time AI code suggestion, improve code quality, and a select. They're putting out things here, yeah, yeah. Up, upselling here, upselling here, owners. Your public profile information, sorting activity with this organization. Sorting search based on the action performed. Hmm. Integration installation hooks. Review audit log. In Seattle. Accepting. Mm. And everything in Python. Mm. Yeah, you're getting hired as a contractor. Mm. Hmm. Okay. Good. Good. Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Let's keep going. Let's keep going.
Using Cloud Shell. So Cloud Shell is this. Okay, so I would like to talk to you about an alternative to using the terminal to issue commands against AWS. And this is using Cloud Shell. So Cloud Shell is this icon right here on the top right corner of your screen. And if you don't see it, just make sure you check out the Cloud Shell availability regions, because it's not available everywhere. And so if you go to the AWS Cloud Shell FAQ, you can see regions, because it's.
This is why I use, right, Cloud Shell availability regions. This is why I choose Europe, bro. It's not available on Brazil. It's available on North America, Asia Pacific, and Europe.
Not available everywhere. And so if you go to the AWS Cloud Shell FAQ, you can see that there are some regions that's not available. So let's have a look right now with the regions. Here we go. Question 3. Right now, let's have a.
So if I take now the AWS cloud, cloud shell. Okay, cloud shell availability regions, right? Is okay. So now I can have access to South America as well. Okay. So now they enhance that. The following are supported. The following are supported AWS region for Cloud Shell, Dockers, and Cloud Shell VPC, virtual private what VPC stands for? Virtual private. Oh, okay, virtual private cloud. Okay, computers on their sites that they has some sort of virtual machines, virtual private cloud. So they have their own. So AWS Pro. So the AWS. So AWS gave us. So AWS gave us an array of computers, so we can have access to them in their private network. Okay, so AWS Google Cloud that lets you launch cloud resource virtual machines and database in a private space, giving you control over the IP range. Exactly, giving you control about the range, the IP range, the subnet, gateways, and security, much like a traditional network with cloud scalability. So it's like you're hosting your own IT department with their own server and computers, right? And and set their own virtual machines for security. So one client, one application running on a virtual machine is not, it doesn't go against, or it doesn't vulnerable, it doesn't break the box in which it's running, aka it doesn't. So if one client is attacked, it doesn't affect others cloud, or it doesn't affect other clients here, and all of them live on their servers, and they provide now scalability. So they're on that business. They're on the server data business. Mm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. The only location they provide is on South America. So Mexico, they won't. Mm-hmm. Mexico, they won't. All right, AWS Cloud Shell. Okay, this is another way how you can have access
one of these
to
regions.
that.
So by the way, I would recommend, if you want to follow along, to just use one of these regions then, so you can use Cloud Shell. But if you don't use Cloud Shell in this hands-on, that is completely fine. If the terminal was working for you, do not worry, you're good to go.
Mm-hmm. AWS Cloud Shell. Just to show you that you can use a web-based cloud that is available to certain regions. Again, so for illustrative purposes, okay? If AWS CLI worked for you, great.
Okay, so we have Cloud Shell in here, and within Cloud Shell, it can take a minute maybe to launch your environment. You can issue commands. For example, you can issue the AWS command. So as you can see, it's installed. If I do AWS -- version, as you can see, I'm on version 2.1
right. So again, you can have access through that. Is based on that.
Right now using Cloud Shell. So Cloud Shell is basically a terminal in the cloud of AWS that's free to use, okay? So the cool thing about Cloud Shell is that whenever you are using the CLI, so for example, AWS IAM list users, this is going to return for you an API call as if the credentials being used where the credentials of the accounts of you using the cloud right now, which is why the API calls are working. And by default, you can specify any kind of region you want to do the API call using the -- region argument. But in Cloud Shell, the default region is going to be the region you're currently in, logged in right now in Cloud Shell. So this is another thing that's good to know. Okay, other things that you should know about Cloud Shell is that you have a full repository. So for example, right now, as we can see, we have 0 files within Cloud Shell. But if you just do echo test into demo.txt, this is going to create a text file that contains the word test. And so it turns out that if you happen to restart your Cloud Shell, then this file will stick. So all the files you are creating within your Cloud Shell environment, for example, this demo.txt, are going to stay. And the other cool thing you can do about Cloud Shell is that you can configure it. So you can say what font size you want, smallest, medium, large, and so on. The theme you want, so light or dark, if you want safe-paced or not. So this is like a bigger Cloud Shell for me right now. And also you have the possibility to download and upload files. So for example, if I want to get the full path to my file, so this demo.txt, I can just copy it right now, action and download file, and then do demo.txt, and this will go ahead and download the file for me. And alternatively, you could upload your own files into your Cloud Shell environments. So I want to show you these handy options because for me, they're lifesavers, okay? And finally, if you wanted more tabs into this environment, you could have a new tab. You can split into column, for example, and there you go. You have 2 terminals into Cloud Shell connected at the same time. So really, I want to show you the power of Cloud Shell in this hands-on. Again, you don't need to know all the commands I just did. I just want to show you, if you're a power user, that you could do these commands and how they work with Cloud Shell. So the bottom line for this lecture, again, is number 1, Cloud Shell is only available in some regions. So maybe try to choose one of the regions where Cloud Shell is available if you want to use it. If you don't want to use Cloud Shell or Cloud Shell is not working for you, this is completely fine as long as you use a terminal the way we configured it from before. This will work just fine, and you will be fine in the course to either use Cloud Shell or your terminal to perform the commands with the CLI against AWS, okay? And also remember that I really like the upload and download feature of Cloud Shell to the upload files and download files from it, okay? So that's it for this lecture. I hope you liked it, and I will see you in the next lecture.
Okay, so this AWS Cloud Shell features. Okay, so you so access to a server. You can access to a VP. You can access to a virtual private. It's a virtual private cloud. Virtual private cloud. All right. Similar, like remotely access to a server. Okay. It provides you a repo to host files and download it. Pretty basically. I don't know how much it charge, because all of this you're using is their resource, bro. Make no freaking mistake about it.
Okay, so I would like to talk to you about an alternative to using the terminal to. I hope you like. So we have to talk about the last component of IAM, which is called IAM roles. So some AWS services that we'll be launching throughout this course will need to perform actions on our behalf on our account, okay? And for this, to do these actions, they're just like users, they will need some kind of permissions. So we need to assign permissions to AWS services, and to do so, we're going to create what's called an IAM role. So these IAM role will be just like a user, but they are intended to be used not by physical people, but instead they will be used by AWS services. So what does that mean? It's a bit confusing. So for example, we are going to create throughout this course an EC2 instance. An EC2 instance is just like a virtual server, and we'll see this in the next section. But so this EC2 instance may want to perform some actions on AWS. And to do so, we need to give permissions to our EC2 instance. To do so, we're going to create an IAM role, and together they're going to make one entity. And together, once the EC2 instance is trying to access some information from AWS, then it will use the IAM role, and if the permission assigned to the IAM role is correct, then we're going to get access to the call we're trying to make. So some common roles include what I just showed you, EC2 instance roles, but also other things that perform actions against AWS we'll see in this course, for example, Lambda function roles or CloudFormation. So I know this is a high-level overview. In the next lecture, we'll be creating a role, but we won't be using it yet until the next section. But
okay, so you have now here is okay. So you have is IAM role for AWS services. IAM roles for AWS services, right? So pretty much like given a batch, right? I don't know how do you say that. Um, um, mm, um, what is the name of that? Of what? Mm. Where are you? Okay, you think you're funny? Azure, sir. Lanyard. Mm. The strap worn around the neck that holds the badge. Okay, lanyard. Lanyard. Exactly, exactly. So it's like a lanyard. Okay. So you can think of the AM role services like the lanyard holding. Okay. It is. Think of this like badge, like lanyard, lanyard. Think of it like lanyard holding a badge holding a badge. Okay, think of this like AWS services with a lanyard holding a badge that describe permission, exactly, describing policies or describing permissions, describing permissions.
Let's go ahead and create a role. I will see you in the next lecture. So let's practice using roles. So on the left hand side, click on roles, and you can see that some roles may have already been created for your accounts. Could be 2, could be more, it doesn't matter. But what we're going to do is that we're going to create our own role in here. So role is a way to give AWS entities permissions to do stuff on AWS. As you can see, you have
So IAM roles activity. So roles is so roles are permissions that we give to AWS services to do
entities permissions to do stuff on AWS.
Exactly, roles are permissions that we give to the AWS service to do stuff on AWS.
AWS entities permissions to do stuff on AWS.
Exactly, on the infrastructure, on the AWS, on the infrastructure. Okay, hey, this particular service, whether it's computing, okay, whether it's computing or storing data or providing security or catching analytics, right? Whatever server it is, this is the permissions that I allow them to have access to the stuff on the infrastructure.
As you can see, you have different kind of roles you can create. Actually, 5 of them right now. But the one that you need to know about for this hands-on and for the exam is going to be a role for an AWS service. So let's choose this one. And then we need to choose for which service we want this role to apply to.
Exactly, which
so
service.
You can see, if you click on it, you have commonly used services, such as EC2 and Lambda, or a role for pretty much every service on AWS. So it's a very common thing to know in AWS, and that's why we learn about it. So we're going to create a role for an EC2 instance when we get to the EC2 section. And so we choose EC2, and the use case is just EC2. We disregard any of these. So click on next. And now that we create a role for an EC2 instance, we need to attach a policy. So I'm going to attach the IAM read-only access to allow my EC2 instance to read
whatever IAM.
Let's click on next. Next, we need to enter a role name. So demo role for EC2 is going to be my role name. And then we select the trusted entities. So this is saying, hey, this role can be assumed by the EC2 service, and this is what defines it as a role for Amazon EC2. We are verifying the permissions. Yes, it has IAM read-only access, and we create this role. So now my role is created. As you can see, it appears in my role list, and we can verify that the permissions are correct for this role. Now we cannot use this role just yet because we need to get to the EC2 section, but we will use it when we get to it. In the meantime, you've seen how to create a role for Amazon EC2 and how to attach correct permissions to it. So that's it for this lecture. I hope you liked it.
Holy moly.
And I will see you in the next lecture.
Okay. All right. Okay.
We are nearing the end of this section, but first, let's talk about the kind of security tools we have in IAM. So we can create an IAM credentials report, and this is at your account level, and this report will contain all your account's users and the status of their various credentials. We'll be actually generating it right now and having a look at it. And the second security tool you can use in IAM is called IAM Access Advisor. This one is at the user level. And the Access Advisor is going to show the service permissions granted to a user and when those services were last accessed. And this will be very helpful because we were talking already about the principle of least privilege. And so using this tool, we're able to see which permissions are not used and reduce the permission a user can get to be in line with that principle of least privilege. So I will see you in the next lecture to show you how to use the security tools.
Oh, okay. Security tools hands-on, but that is credential report, or
So
the
let's generate
access?
a credential report. For this, on the left-hand side, I just click on credential report and then download credential report, which is going to create a CSV file. Now this CSV, because I'm using a training account, is not fascinating, but as we can see, we have two rows in it.
Of course.
We have my root account
not
and my
fascinating.
account named Stefan. We can see when the user was created, if the password was enabled, when the password was last used last changed, when is the next rotation to be expected if we do enable password rotation, is MFA active, so we can see it's active for my root account, but it is not active
for
my Stefan account. Then access keys,
Yes.
are they generated or not? Yes, they're created for my Stefan account, but not for my root account. And when were they last rotated, last used, and so on. You can get more information about other access keys and certificates and so on. So this report is extremely helpful if you want to look at some users that haven't been changing the password or using it or their account. It could be really giving you a great way to find which users that deserve your attention from a security standpoint. Now let's have a look at IAM Access Advisor. For this, I'm going to go to my user, Stefan, and then on the right hand side, I click on Access Advisor.
Has been renamed to
And Access Advisor is going to show me which services were accessed by my user and when. So as you can see, organizations,
last access,
IAM identity and access management with IAM service,
last
EC2, resource explorer were all accessed by my user. So I use my
security
user
tools
to access these things by clicking
the last
on the UI.
access of those users.
But some services were not accessed. For example, Alexa for Business, or it was app to container, and so on. So using Access and Advisor, you can actually have a look at whether or not the user has the correct permissions. And it turns out that maybe based on this access, have 37 pages of this, maybe the user needs access only to a few services, but not all of them. And this UI allows you to drill down. On top of it, if a user accesses a specific service, for example, Amazon EC2, we are told that this is the administrator access that granted access to the service. So to summarize, Access Advisor becomes very helpful when you need to do granular user access permissions on AWS. So that's it for this lecture. I hope you liked it, and I will see you in the next lecture. So here are some general guidelines on IAM and best practices, because I don't want you, if you go to use AWS, to make some mistakes. So do not use a root account except when you set up your AWS account. So by now you should have two accounts, a root account and your own personal account. And remember, one AWS user is equal to one physical user. So if a friend of yours wants to use AWS, do not give them your credentials. Instead, create another user for them. You can assign users to groups and assign permission to groups to make sure that security is managed at the group level. And you should create a strong password policy. Also, if you can, use and enforce the use of multi-factor authentication or MFA to really guarantee that your account is going to be safe or safer from hackers. Then you should create roles whenever you're giving permissions to AWS services, and that includes EC2 instances, which
and
are
if you need to do a more granular,
if you want to use AWS programmatically, or
if you want to use now AWS programmatically, whether you use the CLI or SDK, you can go with, or if that service is available, you can use their AWS Cloud Shell. Again, this is optional. And if you need to have more granular, security level. So security. If you want to have more granular, granular data about, because if you want to have more granular security details, you can use the security last use, all right, or advisors access advisors, like this. Okay. To see that
we're using the CLI, so the CLI or some SDK, you must generate access keys, and these access keys are just like passwords. They're very secret, so just keep them for yourself. To audit the permissions of your account, you can use the IAM Credentials Report or the IAM Access Advisor feature. Finally, never ever ever share your IAM users and access keys. I am very serious about it. So that's it. We are nearing the end of this section. You know everything about IAM. I will see you in the next lecture.
And share responsibility here.
Throughout the CCP exam, you're going to get a lot of questions on something called a shared responsibility model. And this is to ensure that you know what AWS is responsible for and what you are responsible for. Now, I wanted to include some bits of information within some sections to give you an idea of how the shared responsibility model works for AWS. So AWS is responsible for everything that they do, for example, their infrastructure and their global network security, the configuration and vulnerability analysis of the services they offer, and any sign of compliance that they are responsible for. But regarding IAM, you are responsible for a lot of things that AWS will not do for you. You are responsible for creating your own users, your groups, your roles, your policies, the management of these policies, and the monitoring of that. You are responsible for enabling MFA on all accounts and enforcing this, not AWS. You are also responsible to make sure that the keys are rotated often. You need to make sure that you use the IAM tools to apply the appropriate permissions. And again, you are responsible for analyzing the access patterns and review the permissions in your account, not AWS. So this is a very simple example, but an obvious one, but AWS is responsible for all the infrastructure, and you are responsible for how you use that infrastructure. This is just one of these lectures on shared responsibility. I hope you liked it, and I will see you in the next lecture.
They're not full, bro.
So here is a summary for IAM. We've seen IAM users, and they should be mapped to an actual physical user within your company, and this user will have a password for the AWS console. Now we can group these users into groups, and therefore users only. We can attach policies or JSON documents that outline the permission for users or groups, and we can also create roles, and these will be the identities that they sign for AWS services or other AWS services. We've seen that for security, we can enable multi-factor authentication, so MFA, and also set a password policy for our users. We can use the CLI to manage your services using the command line, or the SDK to manage your AWS services using a programming language. Finally, we can create access keys to access AWS using the CLI or the SDK. And finally, we can audit our IAM usage by creating an IAM credentials report and also using the IAM Access Advisor service. So that's it for this lecture. I hope you liked it, and I will see you in the next lecture.
So what is the proper definition of the IAM role? An IAM identity that identifies a set of permissions for making requests to AWS service and will be used by an AWS service. Entity define the password policy for IAM users. Now, permissions assigned to AI users to perform actions. Permissions assigned. Oh, okay. IAM role. An IAM entity that define password policy for IAM users, no. For groups, no. Permissions assigned to IAM users to perform action, no. Is IAM identity that define a set of permissions for making requests to AWS services and will be used by AWS services. Exactly. So which of the following is an IAM security tool? The account, the service report, the security advisor. The security advisor, or known as the LastPass. All right. The security advisor. Security advisor, security report, IAM credential report. Exactly, and credential report. Report, and the other is advisor, known as LastPass. Credential report, which answer is incorrect regarding IAM user. IAM users can belong to multiple users. IAM users don't have to belong to a user group. IAM policy can be attached directly to IAM users. IAM users access AWS service using root accounts credential. IAM users access AWS service using root account credentials. So if you have now root account credentials, IAM user access to the AWS services. This one, you can do that. IAM users access AWS services using their own credentials. Which of the following is an IAM best practice? Create several IAM users for one physical person. Share your AWS credentials with your colleague. Don't use the root user account. Don't use the root user account. Or create several IAM users for one physical person. Create several IAM users. Share your AWS. So don't use that. That'll be. What? Oh. ¿Qué tal? ¿Cómo va?
Sí, lo veo.
¿Sí?
Yo regresar unos baños.
Adelante, adelante. Bienvenido.
Permiso.
¿El baño está acá?
Ah, listo. No sé.
No sé qué problema tiene, ¿verdad?
Pero vos sí que te chorrea agua acá o
No, no chorrea.
chorrea.
No chorrea.
Ese debe ser por dentro.
Ojo, acá lo que hago es bañarme
Sí.
y claro, eso se seca, pero igual tiene cerámica.
Y a veces la cerámica
También filtra.
está suelta, ¿viste? Y
Filtra abajo.
Sí, es muy efectivo. Está bien ajustada. No, está bien puesto. Iba por la de desarrollador. Hacemos todo, así chequeamos y arreglamos.
Claro, ¿qué tiene pensado hacer?
Desarmamos todo esto.
Ok.
Desarmo y tengo pintura para sellar, ¿viste? Sello todo hacia alrededor del caño para que el agua no llegue a pasar hacia abajo.
Listo.
Tiene que estar todo el día acá, pero
Sí.
ah, listo, ahí mejor.
Lo digo porque
¿Necesitas entrar al baño? Si necesitas entrar al baño, entra ahora.
lo digo porque la dueña, esto no es mío, entonces la dueña lo que necesita es saber qué se va a hacer para informarle y eso.
No, solo sacar el inodoro y sellarlo por dentro.
Sí. De todas maneras, lo voy a tomar una foto acá antes y luego cómo va a quedar el después. ¿Alguna otra cosa que se vaya a hacer?
No, solo eso. Solo el baño, no.
What an AIM policy. Let me cerrar esto. What an IAM policies? A set of policies define how AWS accounts interact with each other. Exactly, a set of policies. Yeah. What are IAM policies? Oh, permissions. A JSON document that defines a set of permission for making requests to AWS services and can be used by IAM users, user groups, and IAM roles. A set of policies that define a password, a set of policies defined by AWS that show, no, not defined by AWS, are defined, a set of policies define how AWS accounts interact with each other, not with each other, but with also services, right? Which principle should you apply regarding IAM permission? The least privilege. What should you do to increase your root account security? Enable multi-factor authentication. Remove permissions, only access. Don't create IAM users, only access your AWS account using the root account. Enable MFA. IAM user group can contain IAM users and other group users. False. IAM user groups can contain IAM users only and not other user groups. Right? An IAM policy consists of one or more statements. A statement is an IAM policy consists of the following except effect, principle, version, actions, and resource. An IAM policy consists of one or more statements. A statement is an IAM policy consists of the following except the version, because the version is defined at the policy level that describe that. According to the AWS shared responsibility model, which of the following AWS is responsible for managing infrastructure? Okay. Yeah, and the security tools. Alright, so that'll be all for today's video. Take care. Bye-bye.